I should say that Ed's right that I have practiced law here. I've been pretty much retired for the last 10 years, so I consider myself a recovering lawyer. Only occasionally do I have a desire to sue someone, but I've kept it under control for all this time. In the late 1880s, the people in Kansas were upset. They were mostly farmers. They had too low prices for corn and wheat, too high prices for transporting their goods. Interest rates were high. A group called the People's Party formed, which really took in a lot of Democrats, took in a lot of Republicans. They became the Populist Party. And in 1892, they swept into office, electing a governor, electing a good number of legislators as well. And I put this picture up here because I think they had an open carry law back in 1892. These are Republican sergeant at arms. And the reason they're grouped here is because after the election, there was a debate about who controlled the state House of Representatives. The Populists claimed they did, the Republicans claimed that they did. For a little bit of time, one group would meet in the morning, one would meet in the afternoon. Well, it reached this point where the Republicans in particular hired 50, 60, 70 sergeant at arms and armed them, and it looked like there was going to be battle. They decided to submit this to the Kansas Supreme Court, which consisted of 3 members at that time. And I think this is a great lesson. Here these guys are ready to have a fight, ready to shoot each other. They submit it to the court. The court considers it. Ironically, in a case called In Re Gun, they decided that the Republicans were the legitimate legislature, probably because 2 of the 3 Supreme Court justices were Republicans. They decided that everybody put their guns down and basically went home. Great testimony to the rule of law. I hope that's still true today. The other point is that when people get upset, if they get upset enough, they throw the rascals out. And that happened in 1892. In 1930, it happened again. And it involved Dr. John R. Brinkley. How many of you had heard of Dr. Brinkley before here? A few of you. Yeah, good. The rest of you, if you'd come to my OSHA class, you'd know all about it. Doc Brinkley was a real character. He came to Kansas in 1917. He opened a hospital in Milford, Kansas. He treated people for all sorts of things, but he discovered a goat gland transplant operation where he would take testes from goats and transplant them into men who felt they were lacking in vim and vigor, or as they said, had a flat tire. He started a radio station in 1923. And this was very popular. By the end of the first commercial radio station actually started in this country in 1920. By 1930, there were 12 million homes with radios in them. Many in Kansas. There were stories of the farmers who would actually sell other appliances so they could have a radio in the home. And Doc Brinkley's station offered a full day of music, of lectures. You could learn French. You could actually take correspondence courses from K-State. He sort of invented that idea. And you could also listen to him 3 or 4 times a day talk about the marvels of his goat gland operation and other things. It was a very, very popular station. He was doing well. He was making lots of money. He was getting lots of letters in the mail, as many as 3,000 a day, it was claimed. So many that he actually paid to help expand the post office to handle all of the mail. He came up with this idea that he would have a radio mailbox. And when people sent in letters, he'd read them over the air, and then he would diagnose them over the air, and he'd tell them to go to their local pharmacy and by Dr. Brinkley's tonic number 67 and take that for 3 weeks and some others. Well, at that point, the doctors and the patent medicine people became very unhappy with him. He was poaching. He was taking business away from them. And all of a sudden, the AMA, the Kansas Medical Society, and the Kansas City Star came after him, saying he was a quack. Well, you can make an argument that he may have been a quack. Anyway, the end result was, in 1930, he lost his medical license. He lost his radio station license. He was able to appeal that to the court and put it on hold, so he stayed on the air for a while. And he announced, I'm going to run for governor. He did this 6 weeks before the general election. And he had to be a write-in candidate. Some say he won that election. Ultimately, the Democrat won by about 200 votes over the Republican. We see the next slide. Up in the far corner, well, the history of the election is this. In the far corner, I guess your right, was Clyde Reed. He was the sitting governor. People had become disenchanted with him, and there was a split in Republicans between the conservatives and progressives. Heard that before. And Fred Howe, Chief Howe, ousted him in the primary. The Democrats had Woodring running. These guys were both bachelors. They didn't take Brinkley seriously, either one of them. They seemed to have a very casual election campaign, because in the middle of it, the two of them went off to Boston to support another Kansan who was running to head the international organization of the American Legion. They actually roomed together back there. Senator Allen, who had been governor, was appointed by Clyde Reed to become the United States Senator. Then he had to run for election for the full term in 1930. McGill ran against him. McGill was a Democrat from Wichita. He didn't even campaign. He didn't do anything. William Smith was the Attorney General. He was a Republican from Valley Falls. He actually handled the hearing before the Kansas Medical Licensing Board where they ousted Brinkley. And of course, this is Doc Brinkley down here. Well, what was the result? The result was terrific for Democrats. Woodring won. McGill won. Incidentally, that's unfortunately the last Democrat from Kansas to serve in the United States Senate. That was in 1930 when he was elected. William Smith was running for the Supreme Court because when Kansas was founded, the Constitution provided for the election of Supreme Court justices on a partisan ballot. 3 originally. In the early 1900s, they increased that to 7, which we still have today. Now, Bill Smith was lucky. He won by a very narrow margin, but he became Supreme Court Justice. Both Woodring and Howe, in years later when they were interviewed, admitted that had all of the ballots that had been cast indicating that they wanted Brinkley for governor had been counted, he would have been governor. Bill Smith gets kind of a bad rep. The conventional wisdom is that he put out initially an opinion saying if it was clear on the ballot that you intended to vote for John Brinkley, whether you said John Brinkley or Doc Brinkley or Jay Brinkley, it should be counted. The story is that at the last minute, when the Democrats and Republicans both woke up and saw this guy is going to win on a write-in ballot, that he came out with an opinion saying, no, no, no. If it says Doc Brinkley, that's one person. If it says John Brinkley, that's a different person. You have to count them separately. That didn't happen. He got a bad rep on that. What happened was someone else put an article in the paper that got widely spread saying, well, here are 5 or 6 ways that a ballot might be discounted if it had a little mark on it and this. The some indication that there were a lot of marks that mysteriously appeared on people's ballots, plus just the mere fact of having to write in a candidate's name. A pretty amazing thing. Brinkley got 180,000 votes. The other two candidates got just over 200,000 votes, so it was a close election. Well, why is that of interest to us? Those are two instances where the public became very upset. In this case, they became upset because they all loved Doc Brinkley and his radio station, and they felt he got a raw deal from these people, and that was why the vote came in there. That's a little bit of a concern here. You've got a group of people who just think the Supreme Court is terrible, and you have to worry about them turning out. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. A couple other things that were going on in 1930. The State Judicial Council was meeting, and guess what they were considering? Amending the Constitution to change the way we elect Supreme Court justices. They actually were considering a proposal to elect them for life and to elect district court judges for life. Fairly progressive compared to what they had been doing. And of course, there was one other thing going on that year. We can see the next slide. Yeah. KU was blacklisted by the Big Six, as it was back then, for some kind of an infraction, and maybe we could be blacklisted this year and forget the rest of the football season. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Bill Smith. Bill Smith served on the Supreme Court from 1930 to December 31st of 1957. Ultimately, he became the Chief Justice. Once you're the longest serving member, you automatically become the Chief Justice. But here's the thing about him, and the handout I gave you has got material about it. It was said he was so active in the Republican Party throughout his tenure as a justice that it was said that it finally reached the point each election year that they'd just come in and he would indicate who the slate of Republican candidates should be, and that's who would run. He attended all sorts of political matters, did things that at least around here we would never imagine a judge doing. Usually once you become a judge, you sort of divorce yourself from all of that, although not in all counties in Kansas. So this is Bill Smith. He's a player in this triple play. My good friend Brian Moline, who unfortunately is no longer with us, who was a legislator and a number of other things, wrote the article. It's a good article. It was in the Kansas Bar Journal. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, here are the players in the triple play. We're moving forward now to the 1950s. Fred Hall in the far corner in 1950 was elected lieutenant governor. At that time, he ran separately for lieutenant governor. Re-elected in 52, and Ed Arnn was the governor at that time. Then in 54, he ran for governor. 6-way primary. He won the primary, sort of unexpectedly. Relatively young guy in his 30s. There was great hope that he was going to be a terrific governor. Didn't work out. He had a number of problems, but the main problem that he had was that he had always been a supporter of labor unions. And among Republicans, that's not always a popular position. A right-to-work bill came to his desk, and he vetoed it. And that meant that he was going to have an opponent in the primary election in 1956. And he's not on here. Hamilton ran against him in the election and beat him. So he lost in the primary, and he's going to be out of office. Hamilton is the candidate of the Republicans. John McCush was the lieutenant governor candidate that year, and he won election, a Republican. George Stocking from Lawrence wins the election. So we have a Democrat coming into office in 1957 and a Republican lieutenant governor who got reelected. He'd been reelected before. Bill Smith is in ill health. He's ready to retire. He and Fred Hall get together, and they say, you know, the one thing we don't want to have happen is for George Docking to get to appoint somebody to the Supreme Court. So on December 31st, 1956, Bill Smith resigns from the Supreme Court, retires from the Supreme Court. On January 3rd, Fred Hall resigns as governor. John McCush becomes governor. John McCush appoints Fred Hall to the Supreme Court. On January 14th, George Docking becomes governor. McCush served for 11 days. He joked about when you called for the governor's office, he said, do you want Governor Hall, Governor McCush, or Governor Docking? So that was a triple play. The initial reaction of the Republican incumbents was, well, you know, Fred Hall's probably qualified, he was a good attorney, but it quickly became apparent that nobody liked this idea. I included in your materials an editorial that gives you a flavor of what the press felt. When the legislature came into session, this was a Republican-controlled legislature, they voted by a 2/3 majority in each house to submit to the voters an amendment to change the Constitution to what is called the Missouri Plan. And that was voted on, and in 1958 we changed the Constitution to change to the type of selection procedure that we have now. A merit selection with a retention vote. You serve for 6 years. The selection process is by a nominating commission made up of 5 attorneys, 4 non-attorneys. They submit 3 names to the governor. The governor appoints one of those. After the person is served for at least a year, they're subject to a retention vote, and then every 6 years. And that continues to be the system today. A couple of years, 1972, maybe the next slide shows it, I've forgotten. Maybe not. In, I think 1970, it can't be that late, doesn't make any difference. 1972 is close. The Constitution was again amended to provide for a unified court system. Then it offered the opportunity for the judicial districts to elect local judges on a partisan ballot or go to the merit retention system. We actually have there are 31 judicial districts in Kansas. Some counties like this one the county constitutes a judicial district. Out in the western part, you may have 5 or 6 counties that make up a judicial district. 13 of the judicial districts still elect their local judges on a partisan basis. So if you want to be judge in Wyandotte County, or in Sedgwick County, or in Cali County, you go on the ballot as a Republican or a Democrat. You go out and you raise money and you run for election. Johnson County, Shawnee County, Douglas County are examples of those who opted for the merit basis. In fact, we have just had a new judge named here. Judge Fairchild retired, and we've had a new judge just appointed, and that was done by using the nominating commission. They submitted 3 names to Governor Brownback, and he selected the one who, of the 3 that he wanted, and she will become the new district court judge here. If we can go to this just gives you the triple play. If we can go to the next slide. This is the one I wanted to point out. What's happened in this era where we have billionaires throwing out millions of dollars here and there? We're starting to have a problem in states where they elect their Supreme Court justices with guys with a lot of money just literally saying, I want a decision to come out this way, and they're willing to put in millions of dollars to elect someone who will vote the way they want them to. And you look at some of these, I think Kentucky was one state where usually there's almost no money spent in these races, and all of a sudden it's jumped up to millions of dollars. But if you look down the final column of it, you can see huge amounts of money are being spent on these offices. And that's a real problem. The second part of that problem is we also have groups, right to life. One example, here in this state, the car thing, you have people who are forming around a group and say, no, we don't want people on the bench who are impartial. We want people on the bench who are going to vote the way we want them to vote. And that's the dilemma, I think, that Ryan's trying to deal with. Let's see, do I have one more slide, or is that it? That's it. Anyway, that's the background of this whole thing. Ryan is going to tell you what's going on to deal with it.